recording it now, so we're good. Okay, so the timings of the event. Now, impromptu is a little bit different because you have a total of 6 minutes. And that's for both your preparation time and your speaking time. So once you get the topic from the judge, and as soon as you look at the topic, your time starts. And you use maybe a minute and a half to prepare, to think about your ideas, to jot down a few notes on a note card, because you're not allowed to bring any other notes into the room with you. All of your notes have to be up here. So you want to make sure that you have some ideas ready to go. You can write down a few notes, and then when you're ready to speak, you stand up and you start your speech. And then the timing will continue. My students, I tell them about a minute to a minute and a half of preparation time, which then gives you 4.5 to 5 minutes of speaking time. So
quick clarification. In the impromptu, they can take notes on a fresh new note card and hold on to those note cards while they're speaking, or can they not have those note cards?
Absolutely, yes. You can take note. You can bring in a blank note card or several note cards with you, and then when you prep, when you do your minute and a half, maybe 2 minutes of preparation, you can write whatever notes you want, and you can take those to speak with. So you can stand up and use those to speak with. You just can't bring anything that you've already prepared into the room. The other thing about impromptu is, I don't know whether you've gone over this or not, but everybody who is competing in that room will get the same topic. And because of that, you can't listen to people who are ahead of you in the order. So if you're the third speaker, you won't hear the first or the second speaker because they don't want you to know the topic in advance. So they're going to ask you to wait out in the hallway. So you're going to have a bunch of people out in the hallway to begin with. And then as each person finishes, they'll come out to the hallway and get the next person. And then when you're done speaking, you stay in the room and you can watch the rest of them. But you can't hear anybody before you speak because they don't want you to know the topic. So if, since that's the case, if you're the first speaker, you get to hear everybody else in the round. If you're the last one, you don't get to hear anybody. So, it kind of is a little bit different there. With oratory, you're in the room, everybody stays in the room, everybody's there together, you will hear everybody. And the timing for impromptu, again, is 6 minutes total. That includes your preparation time and your speaking time. Beginners in impromptu, I've seen sometimes go up to 2 minutes in preparation time. You really want to save some time to do some actual talking. And so try to save as much time to talk and have something in your mind that you want to say ahead of time. Did you talk to them about the themes? I don't think you did, because I think
Coach Ruth, that's what my question was, that do we have a specific theme on which the impromptu is going to be based, and can we guide them about that theme?
Yes. Every time you go to a tournament, the tournament administration will set up a theme for the impromptu. And it's a pretty broad theme, but all the questions will have something to do with that theme, or all the topics. They're not necessarily questions. You can get quotes. You can get pictures. Have you done anything with pictures yet? No. You can get pictures, or you can get what's called a resolution that asks you to take a side, almost like a little, mini debate speech. Okay. The theme for this week, and I'm going to put this in the chat, just so everybody has it. The theme for this weekend is called, let me put this in the chat here. Okay, let's get it to everybody. Okay, it's called, Well, That's New, Innovation, Reinvention, and Originality. So, try to start thinking of some inventions that have made a big impact on society. Maybe some things that were changed, that were reinvented. It started one way and now ended up to be a very different way, like a cell phone. A cell phone started off to be just a phone. And now look at it, it's a mini computer. So that was reinvented. Or anything that might be original, some new original idea that somebody came up with along the way. Like, whoever thought of a phone, a cellular phone? We all had phones on the wall at home, and whoever thought of the idea of carrying a phone around in your pocket? That's original. So that's the theme for Impromptu. And I suppose I'll stick with Impromptu for a while, and then we can transition over to Oratory. What I suggest, one of the best ways to prepare for Impromptu is think of areas that you are, I would say, maybe an expert in, or that you know a lot about. What's your hobby? What's your favorite subject in school? What do you like to do when you've got free time? Whether it's playing video games, whether it's science, whether it's literature, whether you read a lot of books, whatever it is, it might be sports. Maybe you play a sport. Start thinking about those areas of your life that you could use as examples in Impromptu. I have had a student just a few years ago who was big into swimming, and he was a big competitive swimmer for the school. And every Impromptu topic that he had, he would find some way to fit swimming into the topic. And, it's so big that, he could talk about the way he practices, the meets that he's been in, maybe some times that he's done well, sometimes he didn't do well. He could talk about how, the hard work gets you somewhere. He could even talk about famous swimmers and people like that. In a topic like this, that's new innovation, reinvention, and originality, he might talk about how technology has helped swimming in terms of, watching people and doing videos of swimmers, analyzing their stroke, find out where the drag is in the water and making them go faster. That would be a good section to talk about in your speech. So my suggestion is for the impromptuers that you have maybe 2 or 3 areas that you want to talk about in your speech. One area should be something that you're very familiar with. Like maybe you read a lot of books, so you know a lot about authors and characters in books. Maybe you watch a lot of movies and you know a lot about characters in movies. But use areas like that. You might even use 2 of them. Maybe you like movies and video games, and have one example from movies and one example from video games. And start thinking of these areas ahead of time so that when you get your topic, you can look at that topic and say, oh, I can apply video games to this, because in this video game, they reinvented this character, or when you die, you get reinvented as this character, or whatever. I'm not a big video gamer, so I'm just making this up, but you get the idea, right? So try to think of 2 or 3 areas that you could talk about under pretty much any topic. And there are different aspects to those areas that you could talk about. Okay. Anybody think of any areas of their life right now that might apply to innovation, reinvention, or originality? What types of things do you like? You can just drop it in the chat or holler out or whatever you'd like. Anything that you can think of that you might apply to those areas. Dance, yeah, dance. Oh, reinvention and originality in dance and innovation. Oh, yeah, a ton of things there. You could talk about any one of those things. There's constantly new dance moves that are coming along, constantly originality in dance. Chess, yeah, chess is that doesn't, chess, original chess moves, probably not a lot of them as far as I understand chess. But when you talk about innovation and reinvention, people have taken famous chess masters' moves and reinvented them and used them in other ways. So yeah, those are some great areas that you can focus on and you can apply to whatever topic you get. So think of, 2 or 3 areas there. And AI. Oh, that one is very ripe for anything you want to do with innovation and reinvention and originality. If you know a lot about AI, you're going to be pretty golden for at least one of your points. Now, I wouldn't make the whole speech about AI. Show some variety, but you could have one good solid point on AI, and that would be great. And if you know a lot about it, that would be a perfect thing to use. And that could help you a great deal. Another thing people use is a lot of personal experiences. You know, if you've had something happen to you or you have some personal experience in your life that you want to share with the audience that has to do with innovation, reinvention, or originality, maybe you want a design contest for robotics or something like that that worked for originality or reinvention. And think about things that have happened to you in your own life. And you can always use those as examples too. I've got one student who always uses his dad as an example. And any topic, doesn't matter what the topic is, he finds something, some story to tell us about his dad that matches that topic. And that's perfectly fine. You know, you can talk about AI, talk about your dad, talk about a sport, and those are your three areas. So start thinking about these things and possibly start writing them down. Now, you won't be able to take them into the room with you, but if you have them written down, you can be reviewing them in the hallway before you walk in. And then you have ideas about what you're going to say. So impromptu, yes, it's impromptu, but you can still prepare for it. You know, preparing for impromptu is probably more important than some of the other ones because you never know exactly what you're going to get. I'm going to share my screen here for just a minute because I'm going to show you, I wrote up a bunch of practice topics for my own students because I've got students who are doing impromptu this weekend too. And I want them to practice on some topics. So I'm going to share my screen and show you some practice topics. Okay. Can everybody see my screen? It should say, well, that's new innovation, reinvention, and originality, right? Everybody good? Feedback? Yeah. Okay. I see some thumbs up. Okay. So here's a couple of topics, basically on innovation. You know, we've got a quote from Steve Jobs. Pretty much everybody knows who Steve Jobs is, right? The inventors, you know, of computers and things like that. Innovation is the ability to see change as an opportunity and not a threat. You know how some people might think that when something changes, it's bad. Change is bad. You might hear that from older people sometimes. They might say change is bad. But this quote asks you to say how change is good. It's an opportunity for you. So whatever examples you provide are going to be examples about how change is good and how that can help you. Right now, when I'm sharing my screen, I can't see the chat. So if you have questions, you're going to have to just kind of throw up your hand or something. But you can look at a couple of these and see what they're like. Imagination plus innovation equals realization. There's one that I like that I gave my students the other day. There's no breakthrough without a breakdown. You know, when they're talking about a breakthrough, you know, when you get a breakthrough, you've got a really good idea that finally happens. And this quote says, well, there's never a breakthrough unless you have a breakdown. So you might have a lot of things that don't work first before you come across something that does. So all your examples there might have something to do with things that you tried and they never worked until finally you found something that did. You know, you can use a lot of different examples there. So there's those things. There's a couple of pictures. I don't have any resolutions today, but I've got a couple of pictures. Here's one that I thought was kind of interesting. This might be a picture that you get. What is that? What ideas do you think that has? Just unmute yourself and yell out. Just go ahead and unmute yourself and yell out.
So like we have the ability to think like of ideas. So like we are able to like innovate something.
Good, good. It's kind of the link between your brain and ideas. Anybody else have any other ideas they might think about this picture?
So you might have a lot of ideas, but you have to you have to think them through, and you have to figure out how to make those ideas a reality or a possibility.
Yeah, you see that little gear there in the middle between the brain and the light bulb? That's what you're talking about with the work that has to be done. Yeah, good idea. That's a really good point. Anybody else have any ideas on this one? Those two were very good ideas, and I think that would get you a long way in talking about this picture. Now, you should deal with pictures the same way you deal with quotes. Okay, break it down, have 2 or 3 ideas about it and how it applies. And you should deal with about the same way. So don't be afraid of pictures. Another picture is this one, and it kind of goes with the quote I had earlier about there's no breakthrough without a breakdown. This is kind of like the example of a breakthrough. Okay, so those might be a few examples of some, pictures that you might get or some quotes that you might get. Okay. We're going along. I'm going to stop sharing right now so I can get back to the chat if you have anything. Do you have any questions so far? Go ahead. You can just unmute and ask.
Just a quick question. I didn't really get what you were saying about the resolution for impromptu.
Okay.
So by resolution, do you mean like with this theme? Well, like that's new, innovation, reinvention, originality. Could it be like, okay, we've taken this step forward, but is it an actual like a step back? Like take like an invention and see the pros and cons of it, kind of.
Yeah, it could be. I'm putting one in the chat that I thought of just, a little bit ago. Resolved, and they'll always start with a resolved. AI should be allowed in schools. You should be able to use artificial intelligence in schools. Okay, so that resolution would ask you should take a side on that. So you should say yes or not. Yeah, it's kind of a debate proposition is what it is. And you should take a side on it. Now, it could be even broader. Let me think. I just had one in my mind, but I forgot what it was. Here we go. I mean, it could be something as simple as this. Resolved, the invention of the fork was better than the invention of the spoon. And then you talk about the advantages of forks and spoons. Okay, you might even get something, you might even take the middle ground there and talk about a spork. Do you know what a spork is? A spork are those spoon things that have the little tips on it like the fork. You might talk about a spork and, be a little innovative yourself. So those would be the resolution type things that you might deal with. I'm going to guess that most of what you're going to use or get will be quotes. You might get one resolution, you might get one picture, but I would say 2 out of the 3 rounds will probably be quotes. So that's what's most common. Okay.
Coach Ruth, sorry to interrupt you. Is there we try to teach them a particular format of stage presence and how they should be working around it and what the judges look for? Is there a specific, you can give us some idea about how they should be, and attire as well?
Yeah. With the judges in impromptu, a lot of them are going to be a little bit more delivery oriented because your content, you're making it up as you go. All right. Because you don't get a lot of time like an oratory speech where you've got, a week or more or longer. Some of my students have been working on them for months, a speech that you do. And so there, every word's got to be perfect. But in impromptu, not every word's going to be perfect. And the judges know that. And it's okay, by the way. It's okay if you, have some partial ideas and things like that. So your delivery is going to be a little bit more important in impromptu. So try to look confident. Okay. Look like you know what you're talking about. And that's a big part of it. You stand up straight and you look at the judge and you have eye contact with them. And that goes a long way. You don't want to have your head down and buried in your notes, because that telegraphs to the judge, I'm nervous and I don't know what I'm saying. So even if you don't know what you're saying, fake it. Okay? Sound like you do. All right? Whatever you're saying, say it like you believe it. And that goes for oratory too. Say it like it's the most important thing that you've ever said. In terms of an audience, I'm catching some questions here. The only audience generally in the preliminary rounds are going to be the other competitors. Sometimes you'll get parents who drop in and watch rounds. So you're not going to have a big audience. The other competitors and maybe one or two visitors, if even that. In impromptu, if you're the first speaker, it could just be you and the judge, and that's it. Let's see. When you get to speech, can you type the chat? Oh, so I know when to take notes. Oh, yeah. When I get to oratory, yeah, definitely. Common to both. Yeah, I am talking about things that are common to both right now. So, but when you deliver your speech, you want to sound like you know what you're doing. And not only do you want to sound that way, you want to have a physical presence that way. So you want to stand up straight. Try to stand still. Because when you're moving around a lot, what that says to the judge is, I'm nervous and I can't stand still. So try to keep your feet planted on the floor. You can walk a little bit, take a few steps in one direction or another if you feel like you're a little nervous, but then stop and talk to us for a while. Don't be constantly moving. Okay? If you're constantly moving, that looks like you're nervous, and you don't want to tell the judge that. You don't want to let the judge know you're nervous. So you might take a few steps in one direction, because what nerves are just energy. Okay? Has anybody, you can throw your hand up or give me a reaction. Has anybody ever been nervous before a sporting event? You go play a game of baseball, or it's an important basketball. Yeah, that's happened to you sometimes, right? But once you get involved in the game, those nerves go away, right? But when you're sitting on the sideline, you're not using up any of that energy. But when you're out playing the game, you are. Well, it's not like in speech where you can run around the room to get rid of your energy. The way you get rid of your energy is through your voice. Be as expressive as you can. Be confident in your stance. You can move and you can gesture. You can use your arms to gesture. You can take a few steps every now and then to use up some of that energy and get some variety in your voice. Have you ever had teachers that just kind of talk like this, and they talk in a monotone, and you can't tell what they're saying is important or what's not, and you get really bored, don't you? You do, don't you? Don't be that kind of person. Be the kind of person that people want to listen to. Be animated, be energetic. Use some variety in your voice. Okay? It's your birthday and you're opening up that present that you've wanted for months. That's the kind of excitement you should bring to this speech. Okay? And whether it's oratory or whether it's impromptu, that excitement will get your audience excited too, or the judge, I should say, if it may only be the judge. And that goes for both oratory and impromptu. Those are very important skills to have. You don't want to be the person who sits in the back or stands up in front and just talks very slowly or very monotone. That's boring. Okay, try not to do it. Don't be that person. All right. Let's see, other things in terms of your delivery. I mean, that's pretty much what I want you to do. Be confident. Look and sound that way. It's not only how you sound, it's how you look. Did you mention something about attire? what you're wearing?
Yeah.
Okay. I can probably tell you that in oratory and impromptu, it's going to be like a business attire. Okay. A lot of the guys wear suits and ties. A lot of the girls will wear like a nice, jacket with a blouse and maybe a skirt or pants. Something that you would think a business person might wear. Guys, if you don't have suits, wear a nice button-up shirt and borrow a dad's tie and wear a tie that matches, hopefully. And that'll make people think that, yeah, I'm concerned about the way I look. I want to look good, and therefore I want to be good. And so with the girls, it's usually jackets, like business attire, or maybe slacks and a nice sweater. I've seen people do that too. But make it something that you would be a little bit dressier. Okay, so think dressier. So is it better to walk around less in general oratory and impromptu? It's about the same when you want to walk around. I wouldn't walk around a lot. You don't want to be constantly moving. But if you're moving, if you're changing, like in your speech, if you're changing from one point to the next, that might be a good time to take a few steps to another, part of the room. Just walk 1 or 2 steps. That's all you need. And then when you change points again, take another couple of steps. Don't walk more than like 2 or 3 steps at a time, but then stand and talk to us for a while. And that's both impromptu and in oratory. So both of those things would apply. So you're going to see people dressed up in suits and ties. You're going to see people in just nice slacks and shirts or sweaters. But it's going to be, you rarely see anybody in jeans. Khakis are usually okay. So you want to try and step it up a little bit. Okay. And that way it'll show that you have some concern about your appearance, and therefore you're going to be able to telegraph that to the judges, and it will show in your speeches. It'll tell the judge, hey, they're concerned about what they look like, so they must be interested in this speech too. So it works out that way too. Okay. How about if we do a little bit, I'm going to show you an example of an impromptu speech. How's that? We'll do an example, and this speech will go through the prep time and the speaking time. So it's like a 5-minute example. All right. Let me pull that up here on my computer so that I can show you. There it is. This is an impromptu speech, and what happens usually? Let me. Can you call him? Okay. The judge will hand you the prompt or the topic. And then, I'm going to do an example of oratory also. The judge will hand you the topic. Don't look at it yet. Take it to a table that you can write on to do your notes. And then turn to the judge and ask, is the judge ready? So you want to make sure they're ready to go. You might also ask the judge if they can call out your prep time. I have my students ask if they can call out prep time every 30 seconds. So you have in your head how much you've used, because that time can get away from you pretty quickly when you're preparing. So you'll hear at the very beginning of this impromptu where the student asks the judge for prep time, could you call out my prep time every 30 seconds? And then the judge will obviously stop that when you start your speech and show you time cards as to how much time you've used. Okay, let me get this ready to go here. All right, I'm going to share my screen again. Okay. Did that help just a little bit? She did a lot of examples that were based on her classes. She was taking a recent history class that dealt with, dictators and Iran and Iraq and things. And so she used examples from her classes. And you can do the same thing too. If you're learning something in history or in English, you're reading a book, you can use those examples too. So any questions on impromptu? Now, I was going to switch gears to oratory.
Yeah, Coach Ruth, just a little bit about the introduction and conclusion, how important it is, and what can make a really good impression for judges to get a good intro or good conclusion, rather than just saying the quote.
Yeah, this will apply to both oratory and impromptu. Okay. When you do an introduction, you want to have, you might have learned about this in English when you write English papers, you want to have a hook. You want to have something that will get their attention. And she gave you the example of her tuna sandwich. Everybody can relate to that. So you want to have some kind of hook. Then you want to explain the topic. If it's a quote, you would read the topic. If it's a resolution, you would read the resolution. This picture, she just described it a little bit. The judge will have a copy of it. So that will obviate that. But even in oratory, you want to have that hook. Then you want to tell the audience what your topic is. So those 2 points always should remain the same. Do you have to say your name in the hook? No. No, you don't. And you can probably avoid that. The thing about tournaments is everybody goes by a code number. You'll write you might have your your judge will have your code number. So you're going to have to memorize a code number. So that becomes basically your name for the weekend or for the day. But no, you don't have to include that in your speech. So you start off with the hook, you tell us your topic, and then you heard her, and this is true in oratory too, you do a little preview. You highlight the points that you're going to be making. She had 3 points: school, Iraq, and dictatorships. So she highlighted those 3 things. So basically in the introduction, the hook, the topic, and the preview. Then when you get to the conclusion, you heard her again. She re-highlighted those 3 areas. She says, now we've talked about the hook, or the school, Iraq, and dictatorship. And then she refreshed the picture again for us, the 3 frogs with the expression on their face. And then she related it back to her hook with the tuna sandwich. And that brings the speech full circle. And you want to do that in both oratory and impromptu. Because when you relate it back to the beginning, it shows the judge that you're done. You've concluded. You don't have to say the word in conclusion. The audience should know you're done. Okay? You might have been in situations where you've heard a speaker and they finish, but the audience doesn't know that they're done. And so they don't know to applaud. And finally, the speaker has to say, I'm done. And then the audience applauds. Well, that means that they just didn't do a very good conclusion. The conclusion will lead the audience to the end. And if you relate it back to the beginning, you've got a full circle there, and everybody will know you're done. So in both oratory and impromptu. Do we have a question? Did I see a hand up somewhere? Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask.
Just to ask, so for our conclusion, the main things are we would re-highlight our 3 main points.
Mm-hmm.
Should we and then we would relate it back to our old hook.
Yep.
And
restate the topic. Restate the topic.
Yeah. So like picture or something. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Now in impromptu, doing those 3 things at the beginning and those 3 things at the end, they take up some time. So that kind of gives you a little less time to speak too. So think about it that way. You know, you don't have to come up with as much of ideas if you do that sort of thing. With oratory, you want to set up your organization, your points that you're going to cover, so that the judge can kind of follow along as you speak. And the judge will probably write down your points that you use in your preview, and they will try to follow you through the speech in both oratory and impromptu. So that's the way that one usually goes. Okay.
And Coach, is it a good idea to, if the quote is there in impromptu, is it a good idea to say agree or disagree, or it doesn't matter really?
Yes, you can. You most definitely can. This student decided to use it and say, I'm going to look at this from 3 perspectives. You can say, I agree with the quote for these reasons, or I disagree with the quote for these reasons. So yes, you can agree and disagree. So you can take a side, and that's perfectly acceptable. Okay.
And when there is a resolution, do you need to express both sides, or just pick a side and just go completely onto one side and express explain the position?
Well, there's kind of 2 answers to that. If you have enough to say on one side of the topic, you can just deal with one side of the topic. Sometimes people don't have enough to say on one side of the topic, and therefore you might bring up some arguments that the other side would say and then answer them. Like somebody would, the other side, on the other side of this topic, people might argue this, but my answer to that would be this. And so you can bring up on the other side, but overall, you should take one stance on the topic, either on a resolution, either for it or against it. Okay?
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Time to move to oratory exclusively. I'll still mention some things on impromptu when we do oratory. Oratory generally is a problem solution speech where you find a problem that you're going to talk about, but then you also should have a solution to that problem. Okay? So you're not just describing the problem. It's a persuasive speech that you want people to solve. And so you want to provide a solution to it. I had a student, and I'm going to show you this speech a little bit later on, but I'm going to do a little preview of it right now. A student did a speech on social media. Do y'all know what an algorithm is? Okay, most people do. Okay, the algorithm is basically what the companies, social media companies, use to determine what you're going to see and what you're going to hear. Okay, and there's a lot of controversy surrounding that because a lot of people argue that it narrows what you're seeing to only one set of ideas, and you don't get to experience the diversity of ideas. And that's bad. And that's what this student was talking about. He called it an echo chamber, where your ideas echo back at you, and you only hear what you want to hear, and you don't hear the other side or any diverse opinions. And he said that was bad. So he took part of his speech and he explained how companies do this and explained why it was bad. And then he offered some solutions to it. What he did was he said that we need to regulate these companies. We need to have some laws on these companies so that we can break up some of these algorithms that they use. And then what he also said was, as individuals on social media, we can follow a diverse group of ideas. Don't just follow those people or those websites or those Facebook pages or those Instagram accounts of those people that agree with you. Follow people who don't agree with you so you can have a diverse set of ideas and that you know what's going on the other side of the topic. And so he gave a solution that was both what the system can do and what we can do individually. And that's kind of important, at least in my perspective. I always have my students do this. When you find a solution to the problem, have a solution that, like, maybe the government could do, pass laws, get stricter policies or something like that. And then have a solution that your audience members can do. What could your judge do if they wanted to try to solve this problem right now? And in this case, it was follow different social media accounts. And that would help. And so you want to have a solution that basically, laws could take care of, and then one thing that the individuals could take care of. So you explain the problem, you tell us how big it is, you persuade us that this is a really bad problem. and then you offer a solution to it. Now, it depends on your topic, how much time you're going to spend on the problem versus how much time you're going to spend on the solution. If it's a problem that everybody knows a lot about, like maybe the example of nuclear weapons that was put in the chat earlier, a lot of people know a lot about that problem, and they know nuclear weapons are really bad. So you don't need to spend a lot of time in your speech talking about how bad they are, because everybody already knows that. What you want to spend time in your speech on is what can we do about it? You know, what kind of treaties or peace agreements can we have? What can the government do? What can we as individuals do? Should we protest? What should we do? And so spend more time in your speech than talking about the solutions. With this social media speech, he spends a lot of time talking about the problem, because sometimes people don't know about what the background of these social media companies are. So it really depends on your topic. Ask yourself, how much do people know about this? And if they know a lot about it, then maybe you want to spend more time on your solution than you do on the problem. And that will help gauge, you know, how much time you're going to spend on each part of that speech. You get 8 minutes. So, you know, you might spend 4 minutes on the problem, 4 minutes on the solution. That would be fine. If it's nuclear weapons or something like that, you might spend maybe 3 minutes on the problem and 5 minutes on the solution. And you can vary that time a little bit. Some examples of some oratory speeches I've had my students do in the past. They're always the ones who think of the topics. I don't think of their topics. They think about them. I have a student right now who's doing a speech on contaminated ice. Okay. The problem is that people think they get food poisoning, but many times it's not the food that poisoned them, it's the contaminated ice. There are no health inspections on ice. They inspect food and food preparation, but at restaurants, they don't inspect the ice or the ice machines. They don't know how often they're being cleaned. Have you ever gone to a fast food restaurant and seen those big big soda machines where, you know, you've got all the different levers for different kinds? And have you ever watched them pour in the ice? They take the top off of these things that probably has never been dusted. And they work it around, and finally they get it off, probably dumping some of that dust, you know, maybe even some little critters that might have been up there, some of the stuff in there. And then they take this big bucket that they bring out of the back and they hoist it up and pour it in. And then they struggle to put that lid back on again. So if you've ever been sick and you thought it was food poisoning, maybe it was ice. So this student spends quite a bit of time talking about the problem, because there's a problem with restaurants. There's a problem with that packaged ice that you buy at like the gas stations, you know, those big bags of ice. And there might also be a problem at home. Do you have a filter on your on the ice that comes out of your refrigerator? All of those things. So she spent a lot of time talking about the problem, and then she talks about the solution, how we need to pass laws and regulate ice just like we regulate food. And then, you know, as an individual, we need to pay attention to what we can do at home to make our ice clean, and also maybe not be ordering ice when we go out. So that's the type of speech that she's doing. I've had another student a while back who gave a speech on the lost art of play, that children, you know, little kids in elementary school don't get to play a lot. They don't go outside and play make-believe. They are sitting behind screens, or they're doing schoolwork or something like that. And just the idea of going outside and playing and pretending and doing all of that is really important for a young child's growth. And so she talked about that and how we need to, in the elementary school, give more time for recess, give more time for organized play, and all of that. So those are some of the types of oratory topics that my students have done in the past. And they can also be scientific to some degree too. Last year, I had a student do one on a chemical called PFAS. I don't ask me what the whole chemical name is because I don't know, but it's in our water. It comes from sometimes pots and pans are made of PFAS, and when those get thrown away, it gets into the water. It's a chemical that's used in a lot of plastics and that sort of thing. And so he gave a speech on how we need to get rid of PFAS out of our drinking water and how bad that is. And so he was basically a biology chemistry person. He liked that kind of science, so he did a speech like that. So think about an area that you're interested in and pick a topic that might work for that area. Okay? And those are the types of things you want to think about with that. All right? Are there questions about oratory? Don't forget with oratory. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just wondering about, because it means many of them use the visual aids, right? But we haven't practiced that, but it doesn't matter really, right? So I just want to make sure that all students understand that the content and the delivery is more important. And
Yes.
if you don't have visual aid, that's fine.
You will find very, very few people using visual aids in oratory. There are basically, it's been maybe a year, 2 years that since I've seen somebody use a visual aid in oratory. It's not very common. You can do it, but it's just not very common. So don't worry about visual aids. Work on your content of your speech and your delivery, and don't worry about visual aids. Some people might have them, but it's not very common at all. Okay. One of the things that you do want to do is make sure that you do some research. Okay. Research is kind of important in oratory, whereas impromptu, you're making up ideas, out of your experiences. Oratory is based on some research. You've got to find some research to support your ideas. Find those sources that say nuclear weapons are a bad thing. Find some sources which say we need to have a treaty with North Korea about nuclear weapons, that sort of thing. So you want to research and find credible sources, not just, somebody, who writes a blog or who posts on Instagram, but you want to find, credible sources, people who are experts in the area, and you want to use those in your speech. You might have heard people make reference to sources by saying, like, according to, that the National Institute of Atomic Scientists. You can use words like according to introduce your sources, because in a speech, you have to tell us what your sources are. We never see your works cited page. You might have to turn in a works cited for your schoolwork, but your judge is never going to see your works cited. So in a speech, you've got to tell us what your sources are. So you want to say, according to this source, the New York Times tells us this. There are a variety of ways that you can introduce your sources, but you want to explain an idea and then use a source to support it. And those sources should be experts. So try to think of, find sources that support what you want to say, and then quote them and use them in your speech and tell the audience that you're using them. Like according to this source, or, the New York Times says that, and make sure that, the audience knows that you did your homework. And, it's not only your opinion that you're telling us, but you've got experts that back you up. And that's important for the audience and the judge to know, because the judge is going to look at that as part of your content in oratory. Do you cite your sources? I've seen judges make little tick marks on their paper every time students cite a source, and that becomes part of their decision. Other judges are more delivery-based judges, and so you have that. Okay, there's a question in the chat. A manuscript was mentioned. Do we need to have a manuscript ready for the day? The rules that the tournament's going to operate under is that you need to have a written copy of your speech available with your works cited if the judge wants to look at it. It doesn't happen often, but some judges might ask for it. Like maybe they heard an interesting fact in your speech and they want to find out what the source was. So they could ask you for a copy of your speech. They'll, you give it to them, they'll take a few minutes and look at it, and then they'll give it back to you. So you should have a copy of your speech available with you, even if you've got it memorized. Okay, if you've got it memorized, then carry a copy with you in case the judge asks for it. Now,
it's also important to have your sources cited in that same copy, right? In addition to the text.
Yes, you should have a work cited at the end. And you use the regular bibliography, whatever. Noodle Tools is something my students use a lot. You plug all your information in and it spits out a bibliography for you. You can use Noodle Tools on something like that, and that'll work. Yes, you can type it. Yes, it's probably easier if you do, because then it's easier to read in case the judge asks for it. But what I was going to go into next is notes. Okay, it's great if you can be memorized. Okay, you don't have to memorize every single word in that specific order. If you memorize the ideas and you get most of the words right, you're in good shape. If you forget what order the words came in and you say it in a different order, that's not a problem. Nobody's looking at your speech and following along. Just make sure the judge doesn't know you made a mistake. Just keep talking and sound confident. You are allowed to use notes if you wish. What I wouldn't do is I wouldn't take up a manuscript with you, because when you take up a piece of paper with you, first of all, it makes noise. You're going to be nervous, and it's going to make noise. Second, some people just bury their heads in it, and I never see their face. I've judged people like this, and that's not good. Okay? What you should do, and I don't know if I've got any examples right handy here. This will do. Use like a note card. Put your speech, write some notes on a note card. I wouldn't put your full speech, because you're going to have a tendency to want to read it, but put the ideas that you're going to talk about in the order that you want to talk about them, and then just hold them in your hand like this. You see, you can move your hands and you can gesture with your card in your hand. Yeah, exactly. And this way, the judge can see you, but you also have your notes right there that you can reference if you need to. Have an outline of your speech on there, or something that will keep you moving when you're talking. These you can handwrite, or you can type them. It doesn't matter. They're only for your use. Okay? Have the manuscript in your bag with you so that if the judge wants to see it, you can hand it to them. But if you need notes, if you're not memorized, then put it on index cards. Yes, keep some index cards. It will help you. So you can do that. Okay? So your notes are going to be helpful too. Before we get too far into this, I'm going to show you we were going to quit at 8. I don't want to have, I don't need Natalia again. And I forgot to turn off the recording for that one. Oh, well. Let me do an example of an oratory. And this is the oratory that I was talking to you about regarding the social media stuff. This student,
Republicans are racist and Democrats are baby killers.
This student placed second in the state last year.
Republicans are racist and Democrats are baby killers.
I keep hitting the play before I hit the share screen. So this student did place second in the state last year. I'm going to pause the recording for just a minute. I should have done it on the first one, but that was an impromptu. This one is, it's his. All right. Obviously, he spent months preparing this. And so, it's going to be, at a whole nother level than what you're going to work on in the next week, because he spent months on it. But it gives you an idea of the format, the ideas, that sort of thing. So with oratory, remember, you want to still present a strong, confident persona. You know, you want to stand up there and look like you're confident. You know, he definitely was. He's one of the most confident speakers I've seen in a high school level. So he did an excellent job. You want to be organized and you want to show your research. You heard him citing sources, right? And that helped. Does it have to be a problem solution based speech? Yeah, in general, there are a few exceptions to that. It has to be persuasive. So you have to be persuading somebody to do something. And so that usually necessitates a problem and solution. So that's the easiest way to go. There are some other ways that you can go, but they're a little more difficult. And, you're doing this just for your first tournament. I'd stick with the problem solution and work that way. It could be, the problem could be just about anything. I've seen people who give speeches about kindness and how we need to be more kind to one another, and that people are losing that we're not kind to people anymore. So it could be quite general like that, or it could be very specific. You're the one who has to decide that. But you heard him quoting sources, and that helps the credibility as a speaker. He's done his homework. And then he went back again and reviewed at the end what he did. So his content followed along in an organized way. But he also was a really good example of how you can use movement, how he walked. When he was changing points, he took a few steps in one direction. Then on his next point, he took a few steps in the other direction. And when he finally finished, he was dead center again. So you can move around like that. That's perfectly fine. You saw the gestures that he had. He moved his hands a lot, but it wasn't distracting because he was doing things that matched what he was talking about. He was talking about scrolling on your phone, and he held, his hand up like he was scrolling on his phone. Those sorts of gestures can be very helpful. So with oratory, work on content, make sure you have good, solid speech, and then practice, practice, practice. Have notes on cards if you need to. Have your manuscript available. Impromptu doesn't need a manuscript because you're making it up as you go, but you can have cards. So take your cards with you and make sure that you're prepared for the speech. So practice, practice, practice. In Impromptu, if you want to have practice quotes, if you've ever heard of the quote of the website Brainy Quotes, it's called brainyquotes.com. I'm going to put it in the chat. All right. So you can go to brainyquotes.com, and there's a ton of quotes there, and you can even use topics. So type in the topic innovation or originality or invention, and you'll get topics that relate to what you might have this weekend. And with oratory, start looking at some areas, listen to the news, see what's going on right now. What's an area that you're concerned about? Are you concerned about the environment? Are you concerned about science? Are you concerned about social issues? Are they going to remove points if you use a note card? No, they shouldn't. It depends on how you use the note card. Okay. If you're in oratory and you've got your whole speech written on this card and you spend your whole speech reading the card, that's where you're going to lose points. But just having the card there, no. They won't take points off for just having the card. How you use it, though, could cost you. So that's why you practice, practice, practice. Same in Impromptu. No points off if you have a card. It's how you use it. Do you read it? Or do you just use it to reference when you want to remember what your next point is? So no points off, but it's how you use it. So that's your job, is to figure out how you're going to use your note card. and use it properly so that you won't get points taken off. But just having it, no. No, they're not going to take points off for just having no cards. A manuscript like this, yeah, maybe, because it can get distracting. I've not seen anybody take off points for just no cards. So you're pretty safe with that. It just depends on how you're going to use them. Okay? We don't have much more time here left. I'll open it up to any questions. You can drop them in the chat, whatever. No cards could affect your delivery and will indirectly result in a lower rank. Yes, absolutely. That's how you use them is the issue. Absolutely. Any other questions on anything? It doesn't need to be, you know, specific to oratory or impromptu. It could be tournament wise. It could be pretty much anything. I'll answer anything you got. Did you find this helpful? Did you learn something? I hope so. If you have further questions, your instructors will know how to get hold of me, and I will very much be willing to answer questions for you. So if you have any along the way that they can't answer, have them drop me an email and I'll be happy to answer them. Is it organized by middle schools and high schools? Unfortunately, no. This tournament is not. This tournament, it's all together. Okay. There is on April 27th. On April 27th, there's a tournament that's just for middle schools. Now, you have to be a member of the Michigan Interscholastic Forensic Association. And if your instructors are interested, I can give them information on that. And that would be only middle school. At this tournament, middle school is mixed with high school.
Yeah, and Coach, I think there is 2 categories, right? The open and
at this one, yeah, there's an open category and a novice category. The unfortunate definition of novice is first year in high school forensics. So middle schoolers have to enter the open division.
Yep.
So you will be with the high schoolers either way.
Yeah.
And you know, that happens. You know, there'll be more middle schools there. I know it. I've seen some more registered, so you won't be the only ones.